So looking at the forefoot, again, forefoot, probably the easiest part of the foot. What we're going to see with the forefoot is we're going to have these tarso-metatarsal joints, and we're going to have metatarsal phalangeal joints. Very, very easy. Again, they're all named for where they are. They're all named for what they attach. So looking at the ligaments of the foot and the ankle, big things to note here. We're going to have a different set of ligaments at the medial aspect of the ankle than we have the lateral aspect of the ankle. Now, at the Tailless joint, remember that's my quote ankle joint. On the medial side, I'm going to have this deltoid ligament. Well, deltoid basically means four. So guess what? There's four parts to the deltoid ligament. Good news is they're all named for what they attach. So what I want you to understand is that we're going to have different sets of ligaments on the medial side than we have on the lateral side of the ankle joint. So looking at the superficial portion of the deltoid ligament, understand, again, things are going to be named for what they attach, right? So my tibial calcaneal fibers, well, guess what? That's going to attach my tibia to my calcaneus, right? That's a genius system they have. So understand where those ligaments are, understand what they attach. Other thing is understand what they are going to limit. So if I am a medial ligament, I'm going to limit eversion, right? I'm going to eliminate or limit a valgus force. Also, take a look at what's on the front side of the ankle and what's on the back side of the ankle, okay? Because that's going to start playing into what limits plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. So looking at the superficial portion a little more, now we're going to see this posterior tibio-talo fiber, okay? Now, if you look at it, it has the word posterior in it. It's in the posterior section. What it's going to do is it's going to obviously still limit or support that medial ankle. It's also going to limit dorsiflexion. So understand which portions limit plantar flexion, understand which portions limit dorsiflexion, and understand that the entire thing is going to limit eversion or valgus force. So looking at the deep portion of the deltoid ligament, we're going to have something called the anterior tibio-talar ligament. So again, it's going to limit abduction of the foot. It's on the medial aspect. It's on the front side or dorsum of the Tailless joint, so it's going to limit plantar flexion. Now looking at the lateral side. Now these lateral ligaments, these are going to be ligaments that we're going to see a lot clinically. You will see some deltoid ligament injuries clinically, but these lateral ligaments are going to be more commonly associated with an ankle sprain, or more specifically called an ankle inversion sprain. Understand that we're going to have three ligaments over here. We're going to have the anterior talofibular ligament, posterior talofibular ligament, and the calcaneofibular ligament. The anterior talofibular ligament is the big one that gets torn by soccer players. And the reason is because soccer players suffer so many inversion and plantar flexion injuries. So now taking a little more of a close look at the anterior talofibular ligament. So a lot of times this is called commonly your ATF ligament or ATFL. What its function is it's going to limit anterior displacement of the talus. What we're going to see with that talus is that it's going to slide forward. This ATF is going to limit that. So if your patient has torn that, then they're not only going to have problems with Tailless motion, but they're also going to have some problems with talar sliding, okay, or this talar moving back and forth, like I said. So the other thing it's going to really check is it's going to check rear foot varus force, and is also going to limit or check plantar flexion. Now the posterior talofibular ligament, what its function is that it's going to check varus force just like the anterior talofibular ligament did. It's also going to check posterior displacement of the talus. Okay, so if the PTF or the PTFL is torn, then we're going to have unlimited or lack of a limit in posterior talus motion. Since this ligament's on the back side or the posterior side, is also going to limit dorsiflexion. So now looking at the calcaneofibular ligament, this ligament is obviously going to attach our calcaneus to our fibula. What we're going to see is it's going to check various forces in the rear foot. It's also going to check distraction, so in other words, the entire talocrural joint from coming apart. And it's also going to check anterior posterior displacement. Okay, so it's going to make sure that that calcaneus doesn't slide back and forth or slide anterior to posterior too much. Now take a look at the subtalar joint. Okay, we're going to have several different ligaments here. We're definitely going to have a talocalcaneal ligament. What this ligament's going to do is it's going to be our most significant ligament. It's going to be the big boy. But it's also going to be taut in supination. So what we really should think about here is what's checking that supination motion. And it's going to be the talocalcaneal ligament. So now here's the talonavicular ligament. Now we're moving into kind of the mid-tarsal joint. This is where things get a lot easier because things are going to be named for what they attach. So take a wild guess at what the talonavicular ligament attaches. Well, you probably already guessed right. It attaches the talus and the navicular. So understand why we have those ligaments. What we want to have here is a very stable base for the talus to operate. We want to have a very stable base for the navicular to operate. So it really stabilizes those two bones together. Now another ligament you're going to see is something called the bifurcate ligament. Now the bifurcate ligament says what it is what it says. It's the ligament that bifurcates or splits in two. So it's going to have one common base, and that's going to be the calcaneus. But basically what we're going to see with this ligament is that part of it's going to go to the navicular, part of it's going to go to the cuboid. Now another ligament, and this one's not as easy, it's called the spring ligament. Spring ligament is a layman's term. Its technical term is the plantar calcaneonavicular ligament. This guy's very important. What this guy does is it provides a ligamentous sling for the head of the talus during pronation. Very important because what we're going to see is that the talus drops when our foot hits the ground and we start to pronate in the gait cycle. So what this spring ligament does is it almost acts like a hammock. It almost acts like the support network, if you will, for the head of the talus to not allow it to drop so much. Now, another ligament to look at here is the long plantar ligament. This is not, and I repeat, this is not the plantar fascia. Okay? Plantar fascia, sits more superficial than this. We're looking at very deep structures here. What this ligament does, two things. It limits the depression of the longitudinal arch, and we're going to get into the arches, and I have a supplement video of the arches as well. It also forms a tunnel for fibularis or peroneus longus. So now, mid-tarsal joint. Again, short plantar ligament. If we have a long plantar ligament, well, then we got to have a short plantar ligament, right? So what we're going to see is these ligaments are not going to sit next to each other. The short plantar ligament is going to sit deep to the long plantar ligament. What it does is basically the same function as a long plantar ligament, okay? But just understand that it sits deep. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the intertarsal and tarsometatarsal ligaments. Reason being is because they're just so darn easy. I'll be honest with you, the dorsal ones are on the dorsum of the foot. Realize that we have ligaments going between the tarsals, and we have ligaments going between the tarsals on the plantar surface of the foot. And we also have tarsometatarsal ligaments, both a dorsal set and a plantar set. So like I said, not going to spend a ton of time on this because there's more important things to really focus on, but just understand that those ligaments are there and they do exist. So now looking at the metatarsal phalangeal joints, what we're going to have to understand here is that we're going to have ligaments that attach each of those MTP or tarsometatarsal phalangeal joints, and they're going to have deep transverse metatarsal ligaments, plantar ligaments, and collateral ligaments. Okay, so understand that all those ligaments do exist, and really what you want to get a sense for here is, and the question you should have is, why do we have those ligaments? Well, what we're going to see is as we start moving, as we start completing and performing the gait cycle, those tarsometatarsal joints, those tarsometaphalangeal joints, are going to start moving away from each other, which is a motion that we call splaying. And what you actually see is the foot gets wider, or it gets this wider appearance as it's accepting force, and it does that as a way to disperse force. So now take a look at the plantar surface of the foot. So what we're going to have, and a lot of you are probably already familiar with this term, plantar fascia. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a layer of fascia that surrounds the dorsum of the foot, and we're going to have this thick, nasty layer of fascia at the plantar surface of the foot called the plantar fascia. We're also going to have a plantar aponeurosis. Okay, and that plantar aponeurosis is going to be this really thick central portion of the plantar fascia. But just understand where that plantar fascia is. Understand that it is a very painful source of injury for a lot of patients. We're going to see a lot of people come in with plantar fasciitis, which just means that the plantar fascia has been inflamed or injured. This is a point where I want you to pause. This part of the foot is very, very intensive, and it's very, very confusing. Take a breath. Draw this one out. I'm going to put some supplement drawings on YouTube to accompany specifically this concept. What we're going to see is we're going to have multiple compartments of foot muscles. We're going to have a medial compartment, we're going to have a lateral compartment, we're going to have an intermediate compartment. Understand where each of those muscles are located. We're also going to get into layers of foot muscles. We're going to have 4 different layers of foot muscles. So understand that we have those. Understand that we're going to have multiple layers of muscle. And then understand what's medial, what's lateral, and what's intermediate. So now taking a look at the dorsum of the foot, that's exactly what the picture is here. Understand that we're going to have some extrinsic muscles. We covered those in the leg lecture. Also understand we're going to have some intrinsic muscles. So very similar to the concepts that we saw with the hand. We're going to have 2 intrinsic dorsal muscles, extensor digitorum brevis and extensor hallucis brevis. Now, what you should have already been clued in on is in the last slide, we obviously saw extensor digitorum longus and extensor hallucis longus. The light bulb should have probably gone off. Well, if we have a longus, then we're probably going to have a brevis. And that's exactly the case. So we do have those brevis muscles. They're both considered intrinsic muscles because they're contained within the section of the foot, just like we saw with the hand. And then understand that the brevis muscles on the dorsum of the foot are going to be those intrinsics.